So for today, you know what normally distributed means? Well, you will by the end of the hour. And calculate the probability that is normally distributed using a graphing calculator. We are only going to be using the graphing calculator for this because I don't think there's any way that even I would try to do these by hand. It can be done, but we're not going to test you on that. Let's talk about different ways you can have data. Do you get that data could be spread out? If this was like, I don't know, could be test scores. It could be a lot of things. Or it could be kind of like clumped to one side. Or there could be like random peaks and valleys. I mean, data can be on a lot of different ways. But in the real world, this one comes up a ton. Have you heard of the bell curve before? Kind of looks like an upside down, like a bell that you would ring, okay? The bell curve is a big deal. And a lot of things are like this in the real world. For example, if we took shoe sizes amongst you guys, the average would be right in the middle. And then most of you guys would be near that. In fact, what we usually do is we say one standard deviation in either direction has most of the kids in there. Vast majority, like way more than half of the kids, are going to be one standard deviation in either direction. All right. Well, I can tell you the IQ one, and that is for an IQ of 100 as the average, that 15 is the standard deviation. So that goes to 115 and 85. That would be the numbers if we were doing IQ. So then, what percent of people? I said way more than half, but we're going to actually memorize those. For this slide, this is just kind of reminding you that they can be skinny or they can be kind of wide. And what controls that? It's the standard deviation. Okay, if the standard deviation is very small, then they don't deviate much from the average. So going out just a couple of points could mean that you're out a couple standard deviations. All right, so if the standard deviation is really small, these can be skinny, or if the standard deviation is big, then they can be kind of wide. Okay, moving on. Obviously, there's half and half. If you split it down the middle, it's half and half. And this is, I think, kind of interesting. The mean, median, and mode are all right here in the middle. So for the IQ, the mean is 100, the median is 100, and the mode, the most common IQ, is 100. Now, you might think that that's true for a lot of things, but it really isn't. Normal distribution, having all three of them come out the same is pretty unusual. All right, let's move on. Hold on, I hit the wrong one there. So this is what I would want you to memorize, and it could come up on the PSAT test, for example. Now, if you took the PSAT as a sophomore already, as for practice, that was really smart. But junior year, PSAT's going to roll around. And a lot of people are like, practice SAT. Okay, I don't really care very much. But you guys are pretty smart. And my daughter taking that, I even took that test way back in the day, the PSAT. And I didn't know that it was important. The kid next to me didn't know that it was important. But both of us, did our best. He got like a couple points higher than me, and he got this thing called National Merit Scholar. And then he got into an Ivy League school because of that. And I wouldn't have even thought about going to an Ivy League school, but if I had studied for and done a little bit better on the PSAT, I could have maybe gone to an Ivy League school. I don't wish that I had, but I just didn't even know. I think a lot of you wouldn't have known if I had sat and said something. So know that the PSAT is like a big deal. Here's another one. My daughter, I told her the PSAT's a big deal, and she tried really hard on it. She, at the end of the test, was like scrambling to try to fix the last couple, and the time was up, and she had fixed 2 problems on the math section, and she made it by 1 point. She made National Merit Scholar. So 50 colleges would have given her a full ride. She chose one of them and went there. Full ride means not just tuition. Tuition, room, and board. They even paid for her food. Her food was free for 4 years. And her sister scored like 2 points less than her and ended up with none of that. No free food, no free room, no free tuition. She got a smaller scholarship, but she got a little tiny scholarship compared to a full ride. So the PSAT is a big deal. So this is something that, for example, could come up on the PSAT. And if you knew these numbers, just having memorized them, they don't give you these. you would have a chance at answering some really complicated stats questions. All right, so 68% of the data is between one standard deviation in both directions. That's like if the middle runs right down the middle, then you go one standard deviation here, and 68% of people are in there. That rounds to 70% of people are just one standard deviation in both directions. The next one's kind of cool. It's 95%. If you go out two standard deviations, 1, 2, if you go out two standard deviations, then all of a sudden you've got 95% of people are in there. And last but not least, if you go out 3 standard deviations, this rounds to 100% of people. But it's not 100%, but it's 99.7. So these three numbers were another reason I needed to know them was I took this thing to be nationally board certified, and they expected you to have those memorized for the normal curve. Okay, so memorize that. But now your calculator is going to do the hard part. You just got to memorize those three things. Yes?
How many points do you have to get on ESAT
To get that full ride scholarship? It does change each year, because what they're doing is they're trying to figure out who got in the top 1/2 of 1% nationwide. And it does depend on each state. So weirdly, one of the best things that you could do to get National Merit Scholar is move to South Dakota. Because on average, their scores are a lot lower. So it's a lot easier to be in the top 1/2 of 1% in that state. So they do it by state. Otherwise, they'd have a ton of kids from California and like the East Coast states, maybe Rhode Island, and they wouldn't have that many from other states. So they made it, you have to be in the top 1/2 of 1% of each state. So in Minnesota, for example, it's really complicated. The best answer is it depends on the year. But I can tell you this, you don't have to have a perfect test. There's never been, as far as I know, a time when you had to have a perfect test. But you can't get many wrong. A couple wrong in each section and you have a chance. Okay? All right, so let's move on. This is a typical question you're going to be able to answer with the calculator, and I would submit that I doubt any of you could do this without the calculator. If you can, this is be the part where you should write down your answer before I show you how to do it on the calculator. And I will be extremely impressed if you're able to figure out what percent of kids are between this and this height. All I got to tell you is what's the average height and the standard deviation. And the calculator can figure out what percent of kids are between these two heights. Try to do it without a calculator, because with the calculator, I'm going to show you that, and then everybody will be able to do it by the end of the hour. It's pretty easy. You just have to know how to put it in. All right. Now, those of you that want to show me that you could even do this without the calculator, I really will be impressed. Do it, but I'm going to move on. And here's another typical question where they give you the average. Remember, mean means average. And they give you the standard deviation, and they want it to be between this and this. I'm going to show you how to do it on the calculator here. There's a slide. Right above the vars key is something called distir, as in distribution. So this is the part where you reason you had that calculator. It's to find distir.
It's going to be half that.
D-I-S-T-R. It's up near the arrows. And now, one of the things that's depressing about this is that I understand what happened here. But some of your calculators are going to be different than other people's, because some of you have the old software and some of you have the new software. The new software made it much easier to do, because the new software is going to give you these little helper questions, like what was the lower of your little bound? I want it to be between, for instance, between 8 and 11, with this is the mean and this is the standard deviation. But some of you aren't going to have that. Some of you are just going to have this, and you have to know what this, and this are. Now, to make it fair, because some people have a better calculator, I am going to be willing to tell you I'll have like a little printout that looks like this, and these are the questions, and I'll give you this so that you know that the first thing they want to know is the lower bound, like the lower set of the two numbers, the upper set of the two numbers. The third thing is the mean, this is the mean, and the fourth thing is the standard deviation, and that goes right there. So if you forget what order they go in, I'll tell you, because the kids with a better calculator would have an advantage, and I don't want that. Okay. So, Emilio, you had your hand up. Question or comment, or maybe you got an answer for that first thing?
Yeah. Yeah, we both did. So basically,
Did you use the calculator to do it?
No, my calculator's in shots.
All right, good.
yeah, basically we just figured that this was just using the standard deviation. So for the first one, that would just be
Prediction?
It's,
Yeah.
for the first one, it's 2 standard deviations, so
So
it's
95%.
All
The
right.
second one
One.
is 1 standard deviation, but it's only
Half,
one
so-
side of it, so it'd be 34%.
Nice, you guys.
You have to do 0.3% because it's.
All right.
Divided by 2, because the other half of that 0.3%
Yeah.
is on the other side.
So that'd be
So 0.15%.
I don't know if I'm going to be able to describe everything you just said, but I'm going to try to just say it this way. I think what they're saying is they figured it out by, and I think they have it, but we'll see the exact numbers in a second. They knew that the average goes here. So again, on my, let's say it was an IQ question. My average goes here. And if they happen to give you numbers that are exactly on a standard deviation, you can do it by hand. Because if you know that this is 68% of all people, and they ask you for between 115 and 85, you can do it by just memorizing these numbers. But we're going to use the calculator, and the calculator asks you, like, what's the lower, what's the upper, what was the average, and what was the standard deviation, and it'll put it all in for you, and it'll do it for you. Okay? So, here we go. I'd like to do that right now. Everybody go to this example problem about rugby players. It's our 9th page out of 11. We're just going to do a couple questions together. You ready? All right. Everybody hit disturb. It's right above the vars key. And then there is 2 choices for that say normal. But we want normal CDF. Normal CDF. Hit enter. Now the reason those you guys that figured this out by hand that still might want to know this is because it only worked because they gave you numbers that were exactly 1 standard deviation out, or some subset of a standard deviation. This could work with any numbers that you want, and it'll calculate it even if they don't happen to be exactly 1 standard deviation in either direction. All right, so now that you've got normal distribution up, it probably says lower, upper. This thing means average. And this thing means standard deviation. If you don't have that, yours just says normal CDF with a parenthesis. And you've got to put them in with the commas in between them. The comma is above the 7 key. And here are the numbers you would put in. The low is 170. The upper is 190. The average was 179. And the standard deviation is 7. So these same exact numbers would go here. 170, 190, 179 average, and 7. Once you've entered that, whichever way you had to, based on if you have a new system or an old system, you just hit enter, and it should give you an answer. And I want you to compare your answer, your decimal, with the kid next to you. We're going to answer these as decimals, like 0.93 or whatever it is. If we go to 2 decimal places, you should have got 0.84. Can anybody verify that if you rounded to 2 decimal places? You guys get that? Good. If anybody didn't get that, I need to go around and help people that got stuck. So raise your hand if your calculator's like not working or something. I'll pause. Okay, so this is where it gets more complicated. By saying at least 175, they still gave you a lower and an upper, didn't they? Now, I know you don't know how short the shortest kid was, but if you want to say the lowest possible number, you could say just 0. Would you agree this is between 0 and 175? Isn't that what at least... No, wait, no, that's the other way around. My bad. That would be under 175. This is at least 175. So that's 175 to... Well, I don't know. Am I supposed to know how tall the tallest kid is? No, so then you say like 1,000. Think you're going to find any kid that's bigger than that? You can pick any really big number you want. Just make it really big. You don't want to take like 195. There might be kids that are actually bigger than that. Do you get that at least 175? Means from 175 to the biggest number you could possibly want. You can put in 1,000,000 there if you want to. Okay, how about shorter than 175? That's between 0 and 175. So the low would be like 0. Upper would be like 175. All right, calculate those two, now that you know how to do them, and write the decimals down. Go to 2 decimal places, please, like 0.95. I'll pause. I got 0.72 for this one, just to compare with me. And for the second one, I got 0.28, as in 28%. Raise your hand if you had that. Cool. Any questions? Okay. Then I want to give you a more real world question. I've been talking a lot about shoe size because we can all relate to it. We all know we have shoes. They have a size. Okay. So let's say that the average in the room, for my just simple research, a lot of people are near a 9. Okay. So I want you to use your calculator and answer this real world question. If the average shoe size in here was a 9, and the typical person isn't way off from a 9 on their shoe size, right? What would you guys say is a reasonable standard deviation? A lot of people say 2. Okay, so let's go with STDEV is 2. Then we need a lower and an upper. So we'd be like, how many kids do you think would be between a size 9 and a size 11? Okay, well, that one's actually got 1 standard deviation, so you could actually do it in your head. But let's make it 9 to 11 and a half. That way it won't be exactly 1 standard deviation out. So we want to say, how many kids are between a 9 and an 11 and a half shoe size? Now, how many kids is different than what percent? First, we're going to figure out what percent of kids. Use your calculator, get that answer. And then, if there's about 30 of you in here. A little less, but we'll call it 30. Then we'll figure out how many kids is that. All right. Did you guys get 34% of kids? Uh-oh. Oh, I didn't do 11.5. I typed it in wrong. My bad. Okay, how about 39%?
Yeah.
All right, good. So 39%. Now, can you put this all together when I say there were 30 kids in here? So how many kids should be between 9 and 11 and a half?
Rounds.
$11.7, would you agree? That's about 12 kids. Now we're going to find out if that's accurate. How many of you have between a 9 and an 11 and a half shoe? Raise your hand. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Holy crap. All right. Do you get that? I guessed at these numbers, and yet we hit 12 exactly. Or maybe it was 13. We're off by a tiny bit. All right, so, moral of the story, I guessed at the average shoe size. I guessed at the standard deviation. The rest of it, we could actually calculate. All right. I think you have the idea. Now, you have a Schoology quiz, which is due tomorrow. It'll take you a while, but you have a partner, and you have me. Go ahead and get started on it, and if you get stuck, please come up and ask. That's all I got for you for today.